Hello, welcome to 2024. We are going to wait just 1 minute and then dive in to give plenty of time to get through everyone's questions. Okay, I am just going to dive in, and we'll go back if we need to. So thank you so much for being here today. This is our last LSA office hours, our first of 2024, our last of the fiscal year 2023 LSA data cleaning and review period. Today, we will be focusing entirely on LSA. We will do a brief, maybe 10 to 15 minute update at the beginning here, and then leave it open for questions. You are welcome. So closed captioning is available. You can use the little closed captioning CC button at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions about closed captioning or accessibility, please feel free to put something in the chat, and Kayla Thompson will happily help you out with any tech-related issues. You will be muted today. We have a team of amazing panelists from the LSA team that will be answering questions today. So some of them may come off of mute, but mostly you'll hear my voice and then some others as people answer questions at the later end of today. In order to ask us questions, you can use the chat feature. So anyone who has been on the HMIS admin calls in the last couple months, it works the same exact way. If you have not been on those calls, you will use the chat, you will put to everyone, and then that will make sure that everyone, all the panelists on the call today, see your question. We have a method of assigning questions and looking for the answers and figuring those out. We should be able to get back to most people verbally, but we might also send questions back out through the chat. So keep an eye out on the chat for answers to questions. When you put your question in the chat, only the panelists will see it until we put it back in the chat with the answer. So if we answer your question verbally, there might not be an answer in the chat. We will say the question that we received and then provide the answer. If you have any questions about that, put something in the chat. I guess if you can't use the chat, phone a friend, call a friend, anyone you know, and let us know so that we can try and get that sorted out for you. Always a good thing to try is to leave and come back in if you need to. Yes, so if you have, well, I am presenting some information, you can start putting your questions in the chat and we will start working on getting answers to those. We will be briefly talking about some HDX 2.0 and vendor updates, LSA timelines, submission process reminders, and then reviewing a couple questions and answers we got from the last LSA office hours. Then the rest of the time will be your own questions. So the HDX 2.0 and vendor updates. We sent out a mass communication email to what we are hoping is everyone working on LSA for every COC. It includes the primaries and submitters we have on file, as well as any other kind of people that we've been tracking. So recognize that anyone who's not a primary submitter, maybe we didn't have your name written down in our very formal tracking system. So if you didn't get the mass communication, your primary and submitter should have, so reach out to them or reach out to your regional inbox and we can resend that email. But basically, I will be going over the main points of that email that went out last Friday. The big takeaways are that some very important updates were made in HDX 2.0 in December that require every COC to replace their upload. So also I'll say vendors are also making, a number of vendors are also still making updates. We recommend that you check with your vendor to see if they're making updates, and if they apply to you. We don't have an exhaustive list on who the vendors are, what they're updating, and what COCs that impact. So definitely reach out to your vendor. But the important things that I wanted to share with everyone today is that if your vendor makes updates, it requires you to re-export your LSA files and then re-upload to HDX 2.0, because if you have exported and then just upload to HDX, it won't pull in new vendor updates. When we make updates to HDX 2.0 that are all listed on the Weebly website, which you can see here, and Juliana will put in the chat, when we make updates to HDX 2.0, it technically only requires you to re-upload your LSA files to the HDX 2.0 website to kind of have the flags reprocess and pull in all of the updates that we made. Best practices, we recommend that everyone just re-export from their HMIS and re-upload every time you're re-uploading, unless you're sure that your vendor hasn't made any updates. But that will just make sure that any vendor updates that have been pushed and any of our updates that have been pushed will go through, and you'll have the most up-to-date flags and data in HDX 2.0. So some major things went through on the apt end in HDX 2.0 on December 21st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The full list of updates are on the Weebly website. You can take a look at. We've also referenced those in other communications, I think, to a lot of people. But if you want to see what that would, I generally referenced it in the mass communication email that I sent out last week, and that is that the main things are there are a couple new flags that were implemented and a couple flags that weren't triggering properly before, as well as a number of flag calculation updates. So in order to make sure that, so it is the case that some people might get new flags that you hadn't seen before, which is why everyone needs to re-upload. But it's also the case that some flags might have dropped off due to calculation issues that were fixed, that were not issues in your data, or data might have changed with and you're still getting the flag, but the data is, the calculation is slightly different. The other big thing is, we'll talk a little bit about flag 1338. The other big thing is flag 1338. Some of those might have fallen off. All of them should have been switched over to a warning flag, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. So the only outstanding issues on our end, the HDX 2.0 end, is that currently we are implementing a fix to flag calculations for some flags in the 1008 to 1050 range of flags. This would only affect projects that were not open for the whole year, and their utilization rates that were basically calculating incorrectly for projects that were not open. This update is hopefully going to be made in the next couple of days, but what I want everyone to know is that it shouldn't create any new flags for people that are not already getting these flags, and it shouldn't impact projects that were open the whole year. So it's like a subset of COCs, a subset of projects that will be impacted by this, and it should result in either flags falling off of your data set in HDX 2.0, or the like percentages being updated and the same flag that you have now would still be there. The other thing on a user interface situation is that flag statuses are sometimes, some people on the call today might already know this, they're sometimes reverting back to note required, even when you've already had a note, and potentially even, let's say you've added a note, submitted it for review, and your review team has said note sufficient, and then you obviously re-uploaded because you fixed some data in your HMIS and wanted, some errors or warnings or what have you to fall off. and then that note sufficient or, warning note and status that you already had, the status fell off. So right now we're not seeing any notes being lost. So that's the good news for those of you who've asked and asked and asked about and experienced that last year. No one has reported any notes being lost. It's just the flag statuses, which is annoying and not ideal. And we do have identified a fix, we've identified why that's happening, and they are also implementing a fix for this, but I don't have a timeline on that. So basically, there's nothing that you need to do. We just want you to know if you do see this, you don't need to worry about it. Our team is aware, and basically, if you already had like a note sufficient, or you see that, you see note required and you note with something that was previously resolved, you can just put another note in or just add notes to the other warnings that you have and resubmit to your team. And our team is prepared to look through and put those note statuses back to what they should be if that happens. Again, the other thing is it's not happening to everyone. So if you don't see this, that's also fine. And hopefully it'll be fixed in the next couple days. So, LSA timeline, not a lot to say, except that the deadline is the 17th. That is a week and a half from today, next Wednesday. Right now, there are no expectations that extensions will be given. If you have questions about this or want to ask for an extension, please submit it to the AAQ desk with the reason why you are requesting an extension. And the extenuating circumstances, and those will be directed towards HUD. Your review team cannot make a determination or decision on extensions. So in order for us, for the AAQ desk to know that an extension request has been made, you have to give it to them and not your review team. We don't want anything to get lost there. So the only other process thing related to kind of the deadline is submitting your warning notes. So I have a couple things here on the slide. Please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to run through these, but we can go back through any of these that people have questions about. A couple key things to remember. So so you have uploaded your data, you have written notes explaining your warnings and why the data is correct, and then you're ready for your review team to review it. You have to submit, or you have to click the Submit for Review button in the top right above your data set in order for your review team to know you're ready for us to look at it. Otherwise, we'll think you're still working on things. That was what the December 15th deadline was for, to get some notes working. It's okay if you haven't done that, but at this point, we are getting a lot of submissions, and we are not going to be able to keep up with the business day turnaround time for all of the submissions. We are doing our best. We're going to get them back to you in as fast as we can, but you want to submit as soon as possible in case we need more information for any of your warning notes. That being said, be as explicit as you can in your original notes, and hopefully we won't need to ask for any more information. When you hit the Submit for Review button, it is not your final submission. Once you do that, our team knows we're ready to look. If we have questions, send it back for more information. If you have errors or warnings that you still need to clean their data on, you don't have to worry that you can't still do that. You can still completely work on things while your warning notes are submitted for review. What happens is you won't be able to add any notes, but you will still be able to see all of your warnings and errors, and you can still work on cleaning data in your HMIS for the flags that need that, or you can keep notes on kind of the warnings that you need to add notes on once it's sent back to you. You can resubmit your notes for review as many times as you need to or want to, and just the same as you can re-upload your data as many times. The thing here is when your data is submitted for review, you cannot edit notes, but you can replace your upload. When you replace your upload, it automatically goes back into your court, and so you are able to add more notes if you need to, or you're able to take a look at, maybe you re-uploaded just to get rid of a data error and you want to resubmit those warning notes for review. You can do that as well. And yeah, you can still see your flags while it's submitted. Let us know if you have any questions about that. And then real quick, I'm going to go over a couple key questions that have come up in last week's office hours for those of you that were still here, those of you that hadn't come last time. We just want to be clear and consistent in the messaging of the answers to these. So I'm going to start with flag 1338, the second one here, just because I started with that already. Flag 1338 on 12/21 was changed to a warning. So if you re-upload after 12/21 at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, all of your 1338 flags should be warnings. You will get this flag for one of two reasons. One is that the project stopped participating in HMIS and the enrollments were not properly closed out. This situation is one that we expect COCs to fix in HMIS and replace their uploads. So if you have a flag 1338 for that reason, we would expect you to fix the data and re-upload based on HUD data standards. The second situation is when formally non-HMIS participating projects begin participating and enrollments are backdated to before that HMIS participation start date. Since there is no official HUD guidance on this right now, you can do one of two things. If you want the warning to fall off your upload, you can align your enrollment dates to the HMIS participation start date. If you do not want to do this, you can explain the situation in your warning note, which is one of the reasons why we updated that to a warning. And you can submit that for your to your review team for review. Seasonal versus overflow, we got a lot of questions about that. Just to review, seasonal beds are not available year-round, but are available on a planned basis and have set start and end dates. Overflow beds are different in that they can be year-round or seasonal and are available on an ad hoc or temporary basis during the year in response to demand. One example of overflow beds is in a situation such as a cold weather temp shelter that is only open when temperatures fall below a certain threshold. These should be categorized as overflow and not seasonal, even though they might only be open seasonally. So if anyone has any follow-up questions about that, we're happy to re-explain that, but just wanted to go over that again. And then the last one is that we talked about this last time. It's when to end and start inventory dates. So in last office hours, we responded to a question stating that the start and end date should be the same, and that was incorrect. So we apologize if we have caused any confusion. We reached out to that COC individually, but we just wanted to address this with everyone in case anyone else heard that and thought they should be doing something different. So inventory, the start date for inventory should be the first night that the inventory is available. So if it were available today, then the start date should be 1/8/2024. If your inventory is changing and the new inventory information starts today, then you would end the old inventory record yesterday. It would not be today. So we have some examples here. There was also some people asking about changes in inventory associated with their PIT date. So this example here has a PIT date of 1/25/2023, where the old, you can see on the left, the old inventory record started the prior year on 1/25/2022, and then ended 1/24/2023, the day before their PIT date. And then their new inventory record or their updated inventory record, based on updated beds, updated household types, etc., would then start on 1/25, the date of their PIT date. And then if it hasn't ended yet, that end date would be null. Any questions about that, we can talk more about, but I will stop there and see if anyone has questions they want to get cracking on. It looks like we've got a bunch that have been put back in the chat, but maybe Victoria, the 905, flag 905 question.
Yeah, I can speak to that one. So this question is from Kayla. Sophia is talking about flag 905. So just for context, this flag was marked as an issue and that it was also resolved on Weebly. And so now she's asking, now that she has the flag, what to look for and how to fix it. Eva doesn't seem to be working in this situation. And so are there any other kind of tools or resources that would be useful for flag 905? And just for everyone's context, flag 905 is saying that there are fewer people reported active in residence in PSH projects during the full LSA report period than was reported among HMIS participating PSH projects on the HIC. So this flag is just saying that there is a discrepancy. There were more people reported on the HIC than there are in HMIS for PSH. So other than Eva, you may want to check if there are any vendor-specific reports that you could kind of tap into that may help you identify any households that should have a move-in date but don't. You might also benefit from cross-referencing your HIC. So that might look like pulling your HIC out of HDX 1.0, filtering just for HMIS participating PSH projects, and just kind of looking through that list to see how many clients were reported on the HIC for those projects. And then what does the LSA say, right, for that same dates? Another thing that you may want to consider, and we sometimes see this, is could this potentially be related to HUD-VASH data? And so we know that HUD-VASH is supposed to be set up as PSH. If you are using the homes import for your data into HMIS, like you're not getting that data manually entered into your system. It's kind of being given to you through this homes import. We know that that data only contains the head of household information. It contains the veterans data. It doesn't contain household members. And so like the clients coming over are coming over as like adult only. And so that might also be something that you want to look into to see if that's where the discrepancy is coming from, right? So like on the HIC, maybe families were counted, but you're not getting that information in HMIS. So if you find that that's the case, please do put that in your note. But off the top of my head, those are the 3 things that you would kind of want to check first in order to tackle that flag.
Victoria, and I think you have another one about 1144.
Yes. So this is from Elizabeth. So flag 1144, we identified it's due to projects requesting to update their HMIS participation after the 2023 HIC. We reviewed the LSA guidance and we understand the course of action is to create a new project when a project's HMIS participating status has changed. But in the case of this flag, our team discussed with the agency about setting up a new project once they requested to participate. However, the agency shared they made an error and their project should have been participating since the project operating start date. So is there any additional guidance to make for any corrections or to add a note for that scenario? So I just want to clarify at this point in time, because of the updated HMIS data standards, you don't need to create a new project when a project's HMIS participation status changes. What you would do instead is create a new HMIS participation record. So in the case of this project, it might look like 2 records, one to indicate the period of non-participation and then the current one to indicate a period that the project is entering data into HMIS. So I just want to clarify that. If the project stops operating altogether, that's when you would close it out. And then if they come back, months or years down the road, that's when you would want to consider creating a new project. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. There's a couple of things that I want to kind of entangle here. So it sounds like, based off of maybe funding or what have you, the project should have been participating in HMIS as of the PIT date. If they weren't, There's some things that can be done. You can create the project in HMIS. You can ensure that they are backdating their enrollments, but it's very important to ensure that, you know, in order to be considered HMIS participating, 100% of those universal data elements for the clients that they're serving, they have to be entered in HMIS. That doesn't mean that we expect 100%, you know, social security numbers, you know, all of the social security numbers are in there. What we mean by that is like the questions are being asked. The client can decline to answer, but the client's answer is put in HMIS. So that's something to consider, right? If I think we have seen for a few COCs here now that these types of projects that kind of came online at a later date, they did update their data and backdate it to the PIT date, and like 100% of the clients that they served on the night of the PIT, they entered the data into HMIS. And we would consider that kind of like retroactively HMIS participating. If the project is not able to do that though, at least at this point in time, I think you might want to, you know, reconsider that HMIS participation status. Let me see if there's anything else in this particular one. On the note of, you know, updating HMIS inventory after the 2023 HIC, I know that's a little bit, it turns out that that's not what this particular agency had an issue with, but just to kind of jump off of this slide that we're looking at here, if a project changes their inventory after the HIC, which is totally normal and happens to tons of projects, you're just going to want to be careful about how you date that inventory in HMIS. So sometimes what we see is, you know, providers or agencies will go in and reuse the existing inventory records. Like they won't change the date, they'll just change the number of beds associated with it. You don't want to do that, right? You'll want to close out the existing inventory records with the day before the updated inventory goes into effect. And then you'll create a new inventory record or series of records, depending on this, if this is for multiple household types, with the date of when that inventory change took place. So Elizabeth, let me know if some of the other things that I talked about help, if that clarified anything, if I made it a whole bunch of gobbledygook, and if not, we can certainly, you know, reach out to your liaison and kind of get something, maybe get something scheduled if you feel like we need to talk more in depth about this.
Okay, let me see what else is going on here. I will answer a couple questions verbally. So, Victoria, were you just talking about 1144 that whole time, or did you talk about anything else?
That was just 1144. That whole time.
Okay, great. I didn't want to say something that you'd already said. Okay, so I was half listening and also trying to find answers to other things. So where am I going? Okay, so one question that we got is to go back to the comment regarding cold temp shelters. So the cold temp shelters are, it's how they're set up. So we are just making a clarification this LSA season based on some questions that came up last time. This is the same thing that we said last office hours in mid-December, but we're just re-saying it again. So seasonal beds versus overflow beds. So if you have a winter shelter that is open from December to February or something like that, and it's open every night, then that would be a seasonal beds, because if they are planned and only available for a period of the year and have set start and end dates with they're open every night during that period. What often happens, or what a lot of communities do, is they'll do that. They'll have a shelter or additional beds open for that December to February period, but only on nights that for example, the weather gets below a certain temperature. And so in that situation is where we were distinguishing between using seasonal beds and overflow beds. In that situation, you would use overflow beds because the beds are not available every night during that period, even though it is a seasonal period that shelter or those beds might be available, because they're not planned and they don't, if you have a specific shelter that's open those dates, they might have a planned start and end date that they could be available, but the fact that it's not planned and when they would be open because it depends on the weather, that's when it would become the overflow. So if there are any follow-up questions about that, or as Victoria mentioned, if I've just made it more gobbledygook, let us know, but that's kind of the distinction we were making there. And then someone else asked me to repeat what I said about the fixed for flag IDs in the 1008 to 1050 range. And so there's not much more on this page, but basically it is that there are a subset of flags in this range. They are utilization flags or utilization rate flags, and it's not every flag in this range, but some flags in this range are, they are basically dividing by 365 for all cases, which wouldn't be accurate for projects that were not open the whole year. So that's why it doesn't impact projects that were open the whole year. And for projects that were not open the whole year, either they started or stopped at some point during the year, they are being divided by 365. So that's why your utilization rate might be off, and we expect that no new flags would be generated. But if you have a flag that's impacted by this, you might be getting utilization rates that are off that either once updated would fall off or would just update the utilization rate. And so depending on your note may still apply. If we're talking about a change from 10% utilization to 15% utilization, you're still going to get that flag and you're still going to need to explain it, and it might be the same explanation. But that's why we are hopeful that it won't impact people greatly. If you're already looking at your flags and providing explanations, it will just require you to kind of relook, but it will require people to re-upload once we fix that. And we will communicate either most likely to specifically to the COCs that's impacting. We will put information up on Weebly as we have that updated, and you are also welcome to ask your liaisons and stuff, but in the meantime, you should be able to just work with the flags that you already are getting. So then, we have a number of questions that okay. So Victoria, if you wanna talk about Matthew's question.
Yeah, sure. So Matthew is asking, so to further the question about projects that were not HMIS participating, if there are projects that were not great about having 100% of data in HMIS, what's the best course of action? Update them in HMIS, update them to not participating in HMIS, lose all of that data for the LSA, keep them as participating, but know that there will be some flags for unusual utilization or length of stay or maybe something else. So I do want to kind of hone in a little bit on what it means for not greats about having 100% of data in HMIS. Like what does that mean? So if a significant number of clients or households are missing, if the project struggled with staffing capacity, or maybe there were, gaps for whatever reason, periods where data entry just did not happen, and then data was not backdated, then yes, I do think that, you know, as a COC, you should look at that project and make a determination of whether or not it should actually be HMIS participating. If it's more that, you know, all of the clients are there, but maybe the data quality of those clients isn't great, or it's you know, not the best it could be, then no. You know, maybe it's just that the clients responded, you know, they didn't know specific answers, or they weren't comfortable giving specific answers. So there might be, you know, high missing rates of specific data elements, but like if a majority of the clients, if all of the clients are there and it's just a matter of data quality, then no, I don't think that's a question about HMIS participation.
Okay.
And I see that there is a similar question from Francis, who has a provider that's HMIS participating on paper, but they're experiencing staffing issues to the point that their data has not been updated within at least the last 6 months. They have enrollments, they are getting counted, but they're causing a flag of overutilization. Can this be a scenario? You know, just like we talked about. I think so. And I do think that it is like a local COC type of decision where you're going to want to sit down with HMIS lead leadership, COC leadership, and then the project itself. But yeah, like if they're not able to get in the data or backdate it because of these issues, then yes, I think it is worth considering reviewing their HMIS participation and changing that. And again, like just because you switch the HMIS participation, it doesn't necessarily mean that these flags are going to fall off. We just need that kind of context and detail and nuance in these notes when you are responding to these flags. So no detail is too small when it comes to these kinds of things, and we do want to know when these kinds of situations are impacting your data.
Okay, so just letting everyone know that if you have asked a question earlier on that we have not gotten back to, there are sometimes things that we are looking up and trying to figure out, and we will either get to the question today, either in the chat or verbally, or we will follow up directly with you. So sometimes we go out of order just because we're waiting to find the answers to things. So, give us a minute. Figure out.
Okay, I can answer a few of the newer ones that have come up while we're waiting on answers for the other ones.
Okay,
so Elizabeth, you have a follow-up question regarding changes to bed inventory, specifically flags 1186, 1190, 1191, and 1195. Y'all identified the same project that affects the difference in the HIC and LSA bed inventory. The agency discovered their bed inventory was not accurate and requested to update their bed inventory and the date of when this changed, which was in April. So that update was processed after the 2023 HIC. Yeah, so I had just mentioned that we should not adjust the current inventory, but create a new one. In this case, since it's an error that was identified by the agency, would we be able to adjust the bed inventory to the date they shared so that it shows that it was adjusted on April of 2022? So dates can be complicated. What I would like for us to come away with for the answer is the number in the flags, particularly for the LSA inventory number in these flags, we want that to be the correct number of beds that are available for occupancy as of the night of your COC's pit. And so if this project had this inventory in April of 2022, and it wasn't correctly reported to you on the HIC, if it's just a matter of updating that April 2022 inventory record so that it reflects the number of beds that were available on the night of your COC's pit, then yes, you can do that. Yeah, because the alternative would be, like you mentioned, or like I had said before, typically you don't want to reuse the same inventory records. That can, in a lot of cases, lead to these sorts of issues with dates not lining up or dates overlapping with your pit date when they really shouldn't be. But I think in the case that you've identified here, if as of April 2022, the inventory didn't change at all for on the night of the HIC, or the night of the pit, excuse me, then I do think it's fine to use that date in this specific case. Okay, there is another question from Tashika. Were there changes made to how chronically homeless adults or head of households are counted in the LSA? Asking due to the decrease in the number served from this year to last year. I don't think there have been any changes. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any. We can circle back around and reach out to you after office hours to confirm, but I don't think that there have been any flag changes, specifically for chronically homeless adults or head of households, and how they are counted in the report. All right, here's another one from Josh. We have a flag stating that we reported a project received ESG CSV funding and that the project type should be ES or rapid rehousing, or the project could be a transitional housing project, but only if it is a legacy project. In our case, this is an old TH project. What would make a project legacy? What makes a TH project legacy for emergency shelter? Excuse me, ESG. That it's old. If it was very old and was receiving ESG funds from its inception, then that's it. That's what a legacy ESG project means. Yeah, so just a note on that, Josh, on that flag is enough to get a note sufficient.
Victoria, I think there's a question you can probably answer about overlapping enrollments. It's basically asking if a client exits a program on 10/2/23 and started another on 10/2/23, is this considered an overlapping enrollment?
I do see that. That's also from Tashika. No, it wouldn't cause an overlap. I would be interested to know if there are specific project types that are involved, or if it's just from one emergency shelter to another. But no, I feel like there's probably there would probably be more overlaps if that was counted. If there
And
is,
EVA can be used for that, right?
yes. So EVA does have a check that looks for overlapping enrollments. They're impossible to find if you're just looking at the LSA data itself. But the nice thing about EVA is that it does include the client's personal HMIS IDs. So it makes it very easy to find the exact clients that have overlaps. Let's see what some of these other ones are. Okay, there's one from Joseph. How can we know which clients are being included in the LSA calculated file for the shelter pit count in flag 1127-1? So like I stated before, the LSA does not include like HMIS client IDs. It makes it very difficult to find clients. It's just the way that the data is set up in that report. So if you are wondering which clients are being included, you can, EVA doesn't necessarily have a check with that, but your vendor may have some specific reporting, like just an enrollment type of report, or maybe there's a point in time count report. I don't know which vendor you have, but some vendors do have those types of reports. When you run vendor specific reports, you will want to make sure that the projects, the organizations that you are selecting are included in your, like they are the same ones that are included in your LSA. All right. There's another one about HUD Bash. Since Homes data doesn't collect all the HMIS data, do we not consider the BASH project's HMIS participating if we're using the upload despite there being data in the project? So if you look at the HUD Bash HMIS data guide, there is guidance about this specific thing. And if you are using the Homes data import tool, you know, even though you're only getting the head of household data, if you're using that tool, HUD does consider that as HMIS participating. And we do recognize, I mean, we have seen this come up a lot for COCs. There will be discrepancies if you use this tool. Like it really, the only way to not have these types of discrepancies is if the VA is literally manually entering in this data, and a lot of them don't. So just be sure that you are making those details in your notes.
Victoria, feel free to take a minute. There is a question up above. If you could take a look at that you and Megan were talking about, but I think and then I have a question I can answer. So I'll put this in the chat as well, but someone asked if they can schedule a meeting with their liaison to discuss nuanced situations related to their COC, and if so, how to go about doing that. Yes, we'll put this in the chat, but I just wanted to say verbally, if you, for anything, a nuanced situation, literally any question you could have, please reach out to your liaison and reviewer via the AHAR region, regional inbox. We'll put in the chat. It's basically AHAR_region, the number. So if you're in region 9, region 10, region 4, at aptasos.com. So we'll put that in the chat. but just email them ASAP, let them know what the question is. Depending on your question, it might be something they can email back, but if you would like to just talk through something, just let them know that and they can schedule time. I will say that I answered a question in the chat about getting how quickly notes could be reviewed. We are getting a lot of notes. This morning, there were 99 COCs with notes submitted for review. So as I've been saying this whole time, that's why we ask people to start submitting their notes in December. Once we get into this period of time, we can't guarantee to get people's notes back within 2 business days, and we just go as fast as we can. So we do have people helping out for those regions that are getting a lot of submissions. If their team can't keep up, we have additional people helping to step in and take over, but there is only so much capacity. So what I would say is reach out, submit your notes, reach out to your review team with questions as soon as possible, and they will get back to you as soon as they can. But also if you want to meet with them, ask them to do that ASAP, because as we get closer and closer to the deadline, their time is going to be less and less. But we do want to help you figure out how to get where you need to go and make the best plan we can for the time we have left. Again, if you were not on the call when I said this, we are anticipating that there won't be any extensions this year, so we are asking everyone to move forward with the assumption, our team as well, that next Wednesday, January 17th, at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So we do a lot of things in Eastern time. We have a lot of team members on the East Coast here at APT, but for the deadline, it will be 11:59 p.m. Pacific time is the last minute that you are able to upload new data sets and submit your warning notes for review. If you haven't submitted your warning notes for review by that time, whatever you have in the system at that period will kind of be locked in, and that's what we'll review. So again, if you have, if you'd like to request an extension, you can email the AAQ desk, and those will be reviewed by HUD. We don't have any kind of control over that, so your review team doesn't have control over that, but I would go forth with the expectation that there won't be reviews or extensions, and to get your submissions and questions in as soon as you can. So yeah, so I'll put that in, we'll put that in the chat, that AHAR regional team email, but if you have been on emails from your regional team, it'll be the same one that you've gotten those from. If you don't know what your regional team inbox or whatever is, you can put your COC code in the chat and we will let you know specifically what it should be. Victoria, is there any questions you want to answer verbally? Yes, if not, that's fine.
Sorry, we've got quite a few questions, so I'm just reading through these.
So yeah, so feel free to pull out whatever you want. If, again, like I said, if we don't get to all the questions in the chat, we will follow up with you individually.
Okay, so Kai has a question about regularly getting 0 utilization errors because there is inventory listed for a project. Let's say the project has inventory listed for adult-only households, but there were no adult-only households served by that project within the reporting period. So this does come up a lot. I would say that if the beds are flexible beds, meaning that they can be used for any household type, and that's very common, then you should enter the HMIS inventory based on how the beds were utilized. And that is guidance that you can find in the HMIS data standards. And it's also included in the HIC and PIT data collection notice. So there's two methodologies there. If you have these types of flexible beds, you can either divide up beds by household type based on the average utilization per household type for those beds, or based on how the beds were used as of the night of the point in time count. So if you have a project that didn't serve any adult child households, but they reported adult child beds on the night of the pit, I think my expectation there would be that, you know, those beds for adult child households were entered maybe because of past utilization. I think, you know, what we really try and get at with inventory is what does the on the ground household type utilization really look like? And I think that is maybe a little off-putting for some providers. They might say, or they might think that because they do not have beds for a certain household type listed for their project, it might look like they can't serve that household type. But that's not what that's not the takeaway. And that's not really the expectation or the assumption. We're really just trying to get at how were the beds used, you know, specifically for these flags on the night of the count. And so Kai, you're asking, you know, should you set the bed inventory for both groups back to what is normally available? Is that the right thing to do? And again, I think this goes back to the dates and trying to figure out like what is the most appropriate thing to do. Is it creating new inventory records, or is it reusing the old ones? And as I said before, you typically don't want to reuse the inventory records. There are cases where that might make the most sense. Maybe this is the case where it makes the most sense because for the whole reporting period, that inventory was not used for that household type. And so maybe it's just a matter of flipping the household type for that inventory record, or removing it and adding the beds to, you know, the other record that currently exists. Yeah, it's a lot of nuance to try and figure out what's the best approach. Usually the most straightforward approach is just kind of closing out the old ones and creating new ones. But in the case where like those beds were never used at all by that particular household type, it might be that the best course of action is just to, you know, update what already exists. And maybe this is a case where you reach out to your liaison and maybe we can get a call scheduled if it seems like it needs that kind of in-depth review, and we can help you work through that.
We are about at time. I'm going to answer a couple questions about extensions. You should submit an AAQ if you want an extension. So someone asked, should they submit an AAQ if their vendor cannot produce the LSA correctly? Yes, that would be a situation in which you request an extension via the AAQ desk and explain the reason why, such as your vendor not being able to produce the LSA correctly. Again, that's a very small number of COCs, so that we're aware of. Another person asked, if granted an extension, would you be able to upload it yourself, or would we have to do the uploads after the deadline? We would have to do the uploads, but again, there are very few number of COCs that have not been able to get their vendor to produce an LSA upload. And so we would recommend, unless you're one of those, that you would have the expectation that you won't have until after, you won't have any time after the 17th. But again, get those AAQs in as soon as you can, if that's your plan. We are going to end now. I know that there are some other questions that we haven't gotten to. We will follow up with you individually via the regional inbox. I see one recent one that's saying that you can't get unmuted. No one can get unmuted. If you have the question, you are still able to put it in the chat right now, and we will answer it. We'll follow up with you individually. Thank you all for coming, and we know it's a crazy time, and good luck finishing this up.